Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, the podcast for mid-career professionals. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me, as always, is my esteemed colleague and partner, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing pretty good, Dr. Dave.
Most excellent, most excellent. So, if you're a returning viewer or listener, thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. If you're new to our podcast, we hope you find it mildly entertaining and more importantly, useful and purposeful. So,
Yep.
in our usual fashion, one of us will now bring in the topic, and then the other one will get us going. And I have the honor today of announcing the topic. And today's topic is preparing for the best outcome. And to kind of set us up a little bit, last week was brainstorming your success. So this week is preparing for the best outcome. So, Joe, take it away, brother.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thanks for reminding us about the topic for last week, and that's kind of where I will start as well. Like Dave mentioned, we talked about brainstorming your success last week. So hopefully, if you're continuing or following along, you do have a list of ideas that you brainstorm for your success. And so now that you probably have an idea of what success looks like, how do you get there? What tools are you going to use to actually get you there? And that's why we thought this was a good follow up podcast to last week's episode, just because now that you have those ideas fresh in your mind, we'd like for you to prepare for the best outcome. Because it doesn't mean anything if you've identified what success looks like, and then you just shelve those ideas, set them on the side, and don't move forward with that idea. So now that you have those ideas, maybe a couple or several that you're thinking about, how do you prepare for that best outcome? And that all starts with, now that you have that idea, that vision, what it looks like. Now, we've said this many times on different podcasts. Now we have to reverse engineer how we get there. So what does that look like? What steps are we going to need to take to get us there? So really, this is more like a plan on how you achieve that success. And so you now start to identify as many of those things that you think you need, your resources, whether that's people, actual equipment, what type of things do you need to be successful or to have that best outcome. So if it's in a personal setting where you may be trying to advance in your career, or just do things differently in your personal life, what are those things that you need that's going to prepare you for that best outcome? It, by the same token, if it's a team project at work, career, what type of tools are you going to need? Are you going to need, like I say, maybe you need a different type of computer. Maybe you need bigger monitors because the projects you're working on, small monitors just won't work. So what are those things now that's going to help you get that best outcome? So this is also that session where you continue those brainstorming efforts. And again, we don't want you to limit yourself to just thinking, okay, I think I need these. Think big and beyond. Think bold. What do you think you need? Again, it may seem irrelevant, or it may, seem like it doesn't matter. But at this point, you're not really trying to pinpoint those exact things. You're again building on that list of things that you might need, and then you can narrow those things down as you get closer to really defining what that plan looks like. So I'll pause there, see if there's any other things you want to add.
Yeah. So, like Joe said, this could be professional for advancing in your career. What kind of things do you have in place? Do you have your resume up to speed? Do you have your interviewing skills up to speed? Do you have your network up to speed? Your points of contact for references? So that could be one aspect of, when we talk about preparing for the best outcome, because you don't want to just go in and wing it if you're preparing for an interview for advancement or to lateral or to go into another company. And then the other example is you could use this to start your own business. And I say this because when I was doing military transition briefings, um, the box was already checked for the military people. They were leaving. They had already checked that box saying, "I'm leaving the military. I'm going to go out into the civilian world. So that meant one of two things. Either they're going to get a job or they're going to start their own employment. And it was about 15 to 20% that wanted to start their own business. So this can apply to that too. So I'm going to use restaurant business for an example. So if you're going into a restaurant business, let's say you want to start your own food truck, who are your food suppliers? Is it a local grocery store? Are you looking at a bigger supplier? What's the timeline look like? What's the time delay between, receiving it? Is the quality of meat and produce up to speed, or is your meat going to be green, which is not a good thing, folks. Don't eat green meat. That's not what we're recommending here. So, things like that. If you're thinking of something in an IT realm, do you have your IT suppliers lined up? Do you have your software products lined up? Do you have all the programs that you need? So when you think about preparing for the best outcome, this is really the planning phase that Joe and I are talking about. You've got your idea from your brainstorming. You've narrowed it down to one, let's say one or two ideas that you really want to run with. Now, how are you going to create that plan for that? What are you doing to make sure you have a good plan? And like Joe said, don't think small, think big. We've used the example before that the kitchen on the ship is producing great food, but if it's sinking, then it doesn't matter. So make sure you have the right people in place. Let's expand this a little bit bigger into the workplace. Let's say you're putting on a bigger project for that promotion or something to really advance the company or your personal business. Do you have the right finance people there, whether it's banking or internal finance? Do you have your legal team or legal software or an attorney that you can confer with to make sure that you're not infringing on any rights? And even within a company, you need to ensure that you're not infringing on rights on other companies potentially. Your IT, do you have the right people in place to build your website, or are you going to build the website yourself? What does that look like? Do you have the right software, the right time frames in place? Um, and again, suppliers, for God forbid you're using printer papers, but printing paper, but you know, who are your suppliers that you're going to if you're looking for parts and pieces to build a widget? So think about all these things and all these players and all these components when you're thinking about preparing for the best outcome. Because one of the worst things I've heard in my career was, oh, well, let's just start it. We'll figure it out as we go along.
Right. Yeah.
And that is the worst approach you can take. And I'm going to go back to a military example. The most critical part in any military deployment or operation is supply chain. If you don't have food, water, and fuel, you shouldn't be going anywhere or doing anything. So when we talk about having the right pieces in place, that's what we're talking about. Those critical components, the absolute needs, not the wants, the needs to make sure that this machine is going to go and operate the way you want.
Well, Dave, you just brought up a lot of things that, and I'll mention this as potential precautionary thing that people may be concerned with. Wow, that's a lot of stuff, and it could turn into that paralysis where you think you're overwhelmed, or you got this long list of ideas and things you have to do to get to that next point. And again, this is your planning phase. And so I just want to caution you to not think about, I've got to do all these things at once. I think what we're trying to say is get together those things. Again, you're going to miss things. That's fine. But like Dave said too, you don't want to go into a blindly and just say, hey, let's get started. We'll figure it out along the way. That is a way to do it. But at the same time, you could be spinning your wheels. You could miss things. So just having an idea, because even contingency plans, if
That's a great point.
you've got this great plan in place, but you go into step one and use example for a food truck. You got this ideal location picked out right along a riverfront. There's a park there. There's a storm. It floods that location. Now you have to move location. So something as simple as that could alter all the plans you had for that business or whatever. So just again, not to scare you off or make this seem overwhelming, but the idea is that you really think about those things, and you don't have to address all those things immediately, but having those things and maybe on a spreadsheet off to the side, but just those things that you also need to think about that could alter that best outcome. So just again, if you're creating a plan and if you've done any type of planning, project planning or anything like that, there are phases for everything you do. I mean, like the first, if we use a business as an example, one of the first things you want to do, like Dave said, as far as the legal thing, if you want to, create a business, you want to say, hey, mom and pops, such and such. First thing you need to do is check to see if somebody already has that name. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's just again a simple thing, a simple search you can do. Once you identify, okay, this is cleared, I can do that. Check that off the box. Next step is okay. So how do I, get a license? So again, these are those things that sometimes are overlooked. Somebody may just go out there and start an, this brand and then realize that there's already a national chain. And then they start getting letters in the mail saying, hey, you need to cease using that name because it's already established. So again, not to scare you off, but just to make you aware that if you want the best outcome, is like Dave said, it's going to take research. It's going to, do some work or effort on your part, not just to say, okay, this is my idea, I'm going to run. So just like I said, I don't want to overwhelm people or think that this is going to be too much, but there are a lot of things to consider if we want the best outcome. They said possibly the right people in the room. If you don't know something, maybe reaching out to somebody who's done it before. Or again, if you can't do your own website. So just those things, again, that we may overlook sometimes, that can make a huge difference and impact whether it's the best outcome or just something that you threw together. So just want to
Yeah.
throw that out there.
Yeah, those are great, great things to consider, Joe. And I'm glad you brought up that approach because it can seem overwhelming. And that's why we want to iterate the needed essential pieces, not all the extra want,
Mm,
you're not thinking out 5 years, what 5 years looks like to get this thing going. You're looking at the immediate, what do you need? What are the essentials right now? And there are a few of those checks, like you said, it's as simple as looking for, a name search, within your state for a business. Or if you're within your company, let's say you have this great idea for onboarding. Well, check to see if there's already an onboarding program. Maybe it's already been
yep.
done, and maybe you're going to make it better versus starting from scratch. So, and to Joe's point, and like we mentioned, make sure you have the right people in the room. And in today's workplace environment, that really does mean finance, legal, IT, and then other partners within your organization. Maybe it's HR, or maybe it's a specific group within the manufacturing or service industry, to make sure you have the right players in there, because you can have the greatest idea and the greatest intent, but if it's not going to work with finance, it's not going to work with legal, it's not going to work with IT, then you've basically just, I hate to say, you've kind of blown the idea. You have to you have to figure it out starting from scratch again, going back to that brainstorming thing. And maybe that brainstorming piece, you have to have a few other players in the room
Right.
to
Yep.
make sure you get the right ideas, and that you're not reworking something that already exists, recreating something that already exists, or creating something that cannot be produced just because of the constraints within the organization or within the company or business that you want to build.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I don't know that we touched on that last week, the idea of brainstorming for success. Maybe we did, but just the idea that during that brain session, yeah, I'm pretty sure we did during
I
that
think we
brain
did.
session, brainstorming session, that you do incorporate other people, especially if it's going to affect other parts again of the organization. You definitely want people in there. But as far as maybe a personal thing, maybe it's a business or something like that, you still probably want to bounce your ideas off of, other people, not to take away from, well, this is the idea that I want to do this, and not everybody's going to agree with it. But again, just again, that person or other people in there providing input or feedback that you may not have considered, and whether you just brush it off, at least you've heard it, or you've seen the concern from a different perspective. I think that's very important. Again, because we may get tunnel vision on this. I got this great idea. It's the best thing since sliced bread, and you know want to go down that path, somebody comes up and says, hey, they already did that.
Mhm.
So I mean, just to Dave's point, you could be reinventing the wheel, or and again, your version may be different, but just keep that in mind that it may not be this all to end all that you think it is because you haven't done any research or you haven't had any input from the beginning. So just another thing to consider when you're really thinking about the best outcome. How
And
does it
be
align with, and you know, that's one of our previous, podcasts 3 or 4 weeks ago. We talked about mission alignment.
Mhm.
Yeah, you may have this great idea for your side of the business and it works for 2 or 3 people, but does it work for everybody? So again, when we think about the best outcome, it's not just for you, especially if it's going to, other people are going to be involved, we need to make sure that it's not going to infringe on their success as well. So again, these are a lot of things you can think about yourself, but it definitely makes more sense to have the key players in the room, the people that it's going to impact or affect. So,
and the part that I was going to add is be flexible and keep an open mind, especially with name branding, whether it's internal or for your own business. Be flexible because you might have the perfect name for your company or the perfect name for the project internally. And internally, let's say you're within an organization, the acronym might come out as offensive and you didn't even realize it.
right,
I've encountered that in my career. It's like, let's do this. Well, you can't do it that way because the order doesn't sound correct. It doesn't sound politically correct. It can be offensive. And conversely, you might have the greatest name and then you do a name search and realize, oh, that's already taken. And as a matter of fact, my top 5 ideas for that name are already taken. So maybe you have to completely switch it up what that perspective looks like. So be open and be flexible.
I think that's kind of where I was going too. Is just that idea that your idea is the end all, beat all, win all. That's really what I was thinking about as far as being flexible, because there you may, like Dave said, you may have 5 ideas that start checking, they're already taken, they're already occupied, or like Dave said, they're offensive or they just don't work. So
Mhm.
it again, we're having you do this exercise for yourself, but at the same time, it still will probably need other moving pieces and considerations from people.
And I'll just give one example. So when I was a training manager, the name was thrown out, staff training development. And that seems harmless enough until you put it into an acronym, STD. Now that can be construed in a few different ways.
Right,
Staff training and development's one, and we all know the other. And if you're not sure,
right,
Google it. I'm sure you'll come up with some
right,
variations. So we had to do training staff development. So there was less subjectivity to it. Let's put it that way.
right.
Dr. Joe, I think it's time.
Think you're right. So this is might take a few times to say because it is more lengthy than what we normally have. But again, so the weekly challenge for this week is create a list of the needed essential pieces and players from your brainstorming session. So you'll have to reflect back on that last week's episode. So examples are finance, legal, IT, suppliers, etc. And then go into some detail for each. So don't just write those down, but really think about what how that will impact or what it the outcome could be if you don't consider those things. So I'll read it again. Create a list of the needed essential pieces and players from your brainstorming session. Again, the finance, legal, IT support, and then go into detail for each. Again, that just expands that why it's important to, connect with those individuals and that they understand what you're trying to do and they may be able to guide you in the right direction. So again, that's a longer one, but I think it'll tie nicely with our last week's topic, brainstorming your success. But remember, in addition to that weekly journal we have for you, we also have the mid-career readiness assessment and the mid-career uh, lever mid-career mid-career level diagnostic.
Diagnostic,
Uh,
yeah.
But yeah, those are all free to you, and hopefully they will make sense. May help you even with this, the storming session, and this best outcome. Maybe those will assist you with that when you again identify where you're trying to go. So I know I took up a lot of time to get that out, but hopefully that'll be helpful.
Yeah. And I'll just expand a little bit on the detail. It could be, maybe you identify the organization and the point of contact, or maybe it's the company and the software that you want to utilize, or maybe it's even including the cost, depending on
Yep.
what angle you're going through. If you're doing a project and you need a cost analysis, or if it's for your personal side, your own business. So, go into a little bit of detail. You don't have to go crazy with it. Um, but just have enough in there to where you're not guessing when you look back at it. You've got basically a point of reference. So, Dr. Joe, what would you like to leave our audience with, our viewers and listeners, for this week's episode on preparing for the best outcome?
Well, I can attest to not having a plan years ago and basically just living day by day, and then encountering things that just came up. And since I wasn't prepared for the best outcome, I had to take a lot of steps back a lot of times because I just wasn't in a position to go to that next level. So, if anything else, like we've mentioned many times on podcasts before, you may be in a very good place in your life in general or in your career. But I think it's always a good idea to have some type of contingency plan just in case things fall apart, just in case things don't go as planned. So that's really the premise behind this, behind the brainstorming your success, just identifying, really thinking about what success looks like, what it's going to take you to get there. And so that's what these two, episodes combined are really helping you to understand the importance of having a plan, having something written down or in your mind that you can reflect on. Well, here's the time that I'm prepared for this. So again, you may not be in a position where you're like trying to advance, you're not trying to move, but what happens if again the floor falls out from under you? What do you do? So we just don't want you to be in that position where you're not ready to move forward at some point.
Yeah, and I think those might be some topics in the next coming weeks. Um, so again, we'd like to that a great way to wrap up the podcast, Dr. Joe. Really appreciate that summarization and actually adding a little bit of fuel towards what may be coming and down the pike. So we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners again for all of your support. If you're um, already a listener, we thank you for your support. If you're new, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. We really appreciate that. And until next time, I want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.